Hey guys, my name is Lauren. Today was actually a test run. I've mentioned in a couple of my other videos that I wanted to test out and compare the new Garmin watch I got that has the built-in optical heart rate sensor in the wrist strap and compare that to kind of the chest-worn heart rate monitors. So I've never really trained off of heart rate before. I've never really kept track of my heart rate or used it as a gauge for workouts or anything like that, although I know it's popular to use and a lot of other runners do. I also know that it's generally understood that the chest heart rate straps are more accurate than the optical wrist straps, but I was curious exactly how similar they are. So I wanted to do a direct comparison of the new Garmin watch I got. So this one is the Garmin Forerunner 235. It has the optical heart rate sensors here in the back. So normally when I have them on my wrist, you can see there's a little bit of they have a green light when they're trying to detect your heart rate, but when they don't detect heart rate, there's no light. So this is the watch I've been using since week 4 or 5 of training for Boston. And this was the first time I've ever really had access to heart rate data. And I noticed on a few runs it would give kind of weird readings. Like sometimes my heart rate would be as low as like 120 for some easy runs, where normally I think easy runs would be around 140 for me. And like efforts should be around 160 beats per minute. Like I just ran the Encinitas half marathon a couple days ago. I had just my wrist heart rate strap for that, and it told me an average heart rate of 160 for that half marathon, which is about what I would expect for kind of a distance race heart rate. Shorter races might have a higher heart rate. So what I did is I bought a heart rate strap on Amazon. I'm actually still wearing it because I just got back from my run. So this is a chest heart rate strap. You can get kind of these flexible cloth straps, or you can get hard plastic ones. So this is the heart rate monitor heart rate strap that I got on Amazon. That's the heart rate strap I'm working with. So what I did was I actually paired this to my old Garmin. So the strap on this Garmin is so old that it snapped off actually earlier today, like half an hour before I was going to go for my run. So what I did was I paired my old Garmin, which is the Forerunner 620. This is a touchscreen Garmin, and it does not have, a heart rate sensor or anything like that. This was actually a hand-me-down from Luis, so I had been using this for about the last 2 years. So this does not have heart rate, so I paired this heart rate strap with my old Garmin 620, and then I ran with this Garmin 235. There you can see the green optical sensors turned on, looking to detect heart rate. So I ran with both of them today. The first thing I kind of want to note as a little bit of disclaimer is I've tried to record this video 3 times because every time I would forget to start or stop one of the watches on the run, so the distances didn't match. This time that didn't happen. I started and stopped them together in the same order every time. So there were about 3 stops at intersections during this run. So they still recorded different distances. This one I think lost GPS signal. The 620 I think lost GPS signal one of the times when I started the watch a couple miles into my run because it was reading like a null pace, so it couldn't find me, it couldn't detect pace. So I think this is the watch that was at fault in terms of distance tracking. So they are about 0.1 off, the distances. So my new watch says I ran 6.9 miles. I think my old watch says I ran 6.8. And because the distances are a little bit different, the paces that they reported are a little bit different too. So the new watch said 6.9 miles at 7:44 pace. The old watch said 6.8 miles at 7:53 pace. So a little bit different distance, a little bit different paces. Also, when you wear a Garmin, possibly other sport watches too, that detects heart rate, after you stop and save your run, it'll give you an estimated recovery time based on, your heart rate and your exertion level and, the distance of the run and things like that. So my new watch said I only had a recovery time of 10 hours, and that was the one that had a slightly longer distance and faster pace. My old watch said I had a recovery time of 28 hours, and that was with a slightly shorter distance and a slightly slower pace. So right off the bat, before I even look at the heart rate data, I have a feeling that it's different, because this must have been reading a higher heart rate if it's telling me I need longer recovery. It's also, again, an older watch, so the software and the updates might be a little bit older too. So we'll take a look at the data and we'll see how they compare, and then at the very end of this video, I might mention a couple more of the subjective kind of preferences or issues I have with these two methods of heart rate tracking. Alright, so I just wanted to have the run summaries up here before we jump into the heart rate data. I'm going to display it the same way I'm displaying the run summaries here, with the Garmin Forerunner 235 on the top. That's the one with the optical wrist heart rate detection, and with the heart rate strap on the bottom paired to my old Garmin 620. So like I already said, the distance and the paces are different, but you can see the moving time is only 2 seconds different, which means these runs were captured approximately for the same duration of time. So we're just going to focus on comparing the heart rate from the wrist and the strap, and kind of ignore for now the fact that the GPS data for the bottom run was wrong. Shouldn't really affect the heart rate readings, again, because the heart rate was being recorded for the same time for both runs. So let's jump into the heart rate section. Alright, so here the optical wrist strap heart rate is on the top, and the heart rate strap is on the bottom. So for both of these charts, the blue line at the top represents my pace, the red line represents my heart rate, the shaded background represents the elevation. So you can see for the bottom run, because it's perfectly flat for the first half, GPS was not recording properly, but again, that shouldn't really affect the heart rate readings. So what we're comparing between these two graphs is the red line at the top and the red line at the bottom. So you can also see underneath each graph the pace average and the heart rate average. So you can see here the general trend is about the same. So there's a kind of a spike before 1 mile in the same place, or a dip around 1 mile in the same place for both. Same thing just after 3 miles. There's a drop in heart rate. I did have to stop there for a pretty long light. And there's a little bit of a dip later on, it looks like at 4.5 or so. So I would say the broad trends are captured by both the wrist strap and, or the optical wrist sensor and the heart rate strap. Although, as you can see from the actual values being reported and the average heart rate shown underneath each graph, the average heart rate for each of these is not the same, and I would presume that the heart rate strap in the bottom graph reporting an average of a little over 140 is the more accurate one. It also looks like the wrist strap heart rate up at the top, it's almost much more level. There are very small fluctuations, like a high frequency, low amplitude fluctuations, whereas the bottom one, it's a little bit more of slow curving up and down, which might be a little bit more natural for a heart rate rhythm. And it seems to coincide with elevation changes. You can see, at least in the second half of those run, those 3 little bumps just after mile 5 seems to correspond to a slight change in heart rate. So basically my impression of this, as I've said, is kind of the broad fluctuations in heart rate seem to be captured by both. But the heart rate strap in the bottom graph is reporting a more realistic heart rate on average, based on what I would expect for my heart rate for one of these runs. So you can obviously take a look at these graphs and kind of draw your own conclusions if you'd like. And now I'll jump into kind of a brief review of the heart rate strap I bought itself, in case you're interested in getting one of those. It got pretty good reviews. It was only about $30 or so. So it's kind of this stretchy elastic fabric here, and then on the back, this section. is kind of this plastic conductance. So it does a better job of detecting your heart rate when it's a little bit damp. So sometimes they suggest when you first start out your run, you could get a little bit damp just with water when you put it on. You wear it kind of right here on your rib cage. So for me, that's right at the bottom of where my sports bra is. So this can be a little bit awkward. Usually I want to wear this heart rate strap kind of exactly where the bottom of my sports bra sits. But if this is a very narrow band, sometimes what can happen is like the heart rate strap kind of like works its way down a little bit. So I try to tuck it like completely under the bottom of my sports bra to get it to like stay in place. But it is a little bit awkward, and this is, obviously kind of more of a female problem for that reason. I don't really see myself using a heart rate strap that much for training purposes. I feel like you could do pretty well with rate of perceived exertion, or RPE. You're also supposed to rinse this heart rate strap after every time you use it. And also, before you do that, this is the actual heart rate piece. It has the two little prongs on the back. You just pop it in, so you pop this off. You're supposed to rinse the strap and let it dry to help it last a little bit longer. So I think the reviews for this said the battery will last about a couple years. The problem is you have to make sure you wear it in the right spot too, and that it doesn't move. It has to be worn above your wrist bone. I also think it's pretty accurate at rest. When you're not moving around too much, it's making good contact with the skin. Because I have tried to check that the heart rate on this watch is matching my real heart rate by just taking my heart rate and checking that it matches. So this one can fluctuate a lot minute to minute, but I think on average at rest or while walking, it's pretty accurate. But generally for runs, it doesn't seem quite as accurate. Sometimes it seems accurate, like with the half marathon and most of my easy runs, it's reporting heart rates that are consistent with my rate of perceived exertion and seems to match up with the paces I'm running and the kind of terrain I'm running on. But sometimes it doesn't seem very good, like today's run where it's reporting a heart rate in the 120s, which I don't think is accurate. So I actually wanted to show you my heart rate data from the half marathon I ran a few days ago, just for comparison. So the same colors are represented here as the previous graphs, where heart rate is in red. So you can see here my heart rate is pretty consistently elevated for the entire duration of the race, and it's reporting an average heart rate of 161, which is consistent with kind of this race and this effort. So I just wanted to include this as kind of evidence that sometimes it seems like the optical wrist strap sensor does an okay job of reporting heart rate. I think a lot of it just depends on if the wrist strap is properly tightened and in the right place and continues to make good contact, and there's nothing interfering with it, like a long sleeve or a glove or something like that. So I just wanted to film a quick kind of summary to this video on my impressions, and if you're looking for something to monitor heart rate, things that you might want to think about. So in general, I like using the optical wrist strap heart rate, but that's primarily because I don't rely on heart rate as a strong indicator of training and recovery. So I've never really trained or used heart rate before as part of my training plan. I've never really relied on the accuracy of that data. So for me, having the optical heart rate wrist strap is kind of like a nice supplement. I'm not reliant on the data being incredibly accurate, but sometimes I think it's interesting to look at. If you're somebody who's used to training with heart rate data, you probably already have a heart rate strap. And if you want to get into training based on heart rate, you probably want to invest in a heart rate strap. Buying a new watch with optical heart rate is a lot more expensive than just buying a heart rate strap to use with your current watch. So I would say I'm happy with the watch I have, and the fact that it gives heart rate I think is nice. I do think it's accurate at rest. So my heart rate tends to be in the low 30s at rest. I've checked it manually. That's what it is. That's what the watch reports. So I do think it's reasonable enough at rest. but during hard efforts may or may not be giving you accurate data. So hopefully that was interesting and helpful. If you have any other questions about my experience with the wrist strap or the chest strap, please let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.